She went looking for peace but walked right into a trap. The reunion turned into a cruel spectacle in front of thousands. Pregnant and alone, she watched her pain become a show. But the truth came out and turned the tables. If you're hooked by this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let me know what city you're watching from. Now let's continue. Madison woke up that Thursday morning with a weight on her chest she could no longer ignore. At 6 months pregnant, her body carried not only the weight of the life growing inside her, but also the emotional burden of a marriage that had silently shattered. She stared at the white ceiling of the room she now occupied alone, in her mother's house in New York City, and felt tears stream from the corners of her eyes. Another sleepless night, another day trying to find strength where there seemed to be none left. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Madison hesitated before picking it up. For the past few months, every notification brought a new storm with it. It could be a cruel message from Jessica, the woman who had destroyed her marriage. It could be another demand from Ryan, her ex-husband, insisting she accept his terms for the divorce. Or it could be, as it had been so many times, a new public humiliation on social media where her private life was being exposed piece by piece. She took a deep breath and unlocked the screen. It was Ryan. The message was different from the aggressive tone of the past few weeks. He said he needed to talk to her in person, that he had reflected on everything, that maybe they could find a civilized solution to it all. He talked about the baby, about the possibility of starting over as parents, even if not as a couple. He asked her to meet him at a secluded place where they could talk calmly, away from the prying eyes and judgments of the city. Madison felt her heart race. Part of her wanted to believe it. She desperately wanted to believe there was still a chance to resolve everything with dignity, to protect her child from the war that had erupted between them. But another part, the part that had learned to be suspicious over the last few weeks, whispered warnings she chose to ignore. She got up slowly, feeling the weight of her belly, and walked to the kitchen. Her mother, Helen, was already making coffee. She was a woman of firm posture, with grey hair tied in a flawless bun and eyes that held decades of experience. A family law attorney, Helen had dedicated her entire life to defending vulnerable women. Ironically, she now saw her own daughter in that position. "Good morning, honey," Helen said, pouring a cup of coffee. "How did you sleep?" Madison forced a smile. So, Mom, the baby won't stop kicking." Helen watched her with that piercing gaze. Only mothers have, the one that sees beyond words. "You're hiding something from me," Madison sighed. "Ryan texted me. He wants to talk." Helen's face immediately hardened. "Madison, we've been over this. Any communication with him needs to go through the lawyers. You can't trust him, not after everything he's done." "I know, Mum, but he seems different this time. He says he wants to resolve things amicably, for the baby's sake." "And you believe that?" Helen crossed her arms. "This man cheated on you for months, humiliated you publicly. And now, along with that woman, he's trying to destroy your reputation. He doesn't want to resolve anything, Madison. He wants to manipulate you." Madison felt the tears welling up again. "I just want this to be over, Mom. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of waking up every day, afraid of what I'll find online. I want my son to be born into peace." Helen came closer and held her daughter's hands firmly. "And he will be. But you need to be strong right now. You can't give in to emotional blackmail. Ryan knows exactly which buttons to push to make you vulnerable." Madison knew her mother was right. She always was. But her heart still insisted on looking for exits where reason saw none. She promised she would think it over, that she wouldn't make any rash decisions. Helen had to leave early for an important hearing, but not before making her daughter swear she wouldn't do anything without telling her first. As soon as she was alone, Madison looked at her phone again. Ryan had sent more messages. He talked about the location, a friend's house in the suburbs just outside the city, where they could have privacy. He attached photos of the place, a quiet setting surrounded by greenery, far from the chaos of the city. He said Jessica wouldn't be there, that it would be just the two of them talking like adults, thinking about the future of the child they were expecting. Madison felt her chest tighten. This child hadn't been planned, but from the moment she found out she was pregnant, he became the reason for everything. The reason to keep going, to endure the pain, to not give up. If there was even the slightest chance that this child could grow up with some kind of harmony between his parents, she had to try, even if it meant facing Ryan one more time. Against all the warnings echoing in her mind, against the promise she had made to her mother, Madison decided to go. She sent a message accepting the meeting, scheduled for late afternoon. She didn't tell anyone. She was afraid that if she did, someone would stop her, and she needed to do this. She needed to look the father of her child in the eyes and try, one last time, to find a way out. The hours passed slowly. Madison tried to distract herself, but her anxiety grew with each passing minute. She changed her clothes several times, looking for something that would make her feel even slightly confident. She settled on a simple dress, comfortable for her growing belly, and a light jacket. She grabbed her purse, checked that her phone was charged, and left the house around 4 in the afternoon. The drive to the house took almost an hour. Madison drove slowly, her nervousness increasing as she moved away from the city. The urban landscape gave way to emptier roads surrounded by vegetation. Her phone pinged with a message from Ryan, confirming he was already there, waiting for her. When she finally reached the gate, Madison felt a chill run down her spine. The place was exactly as it looked in the photos, but there was something in the atmosphere that bothered her. Maybe it was just fear. Maybe it was her intuition trying to scream something she didn't want to hear. She parked the car and got out slowly. The front door of the house opened and Ryan appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, with the same smile that had once won her over and now only made her suspicious. He walked down the porch steps toward her. "Madison, I'm so glad you came," he said with a forced kindness. "Let's talk inside. It'll be more comfortable." She followed him in silence, each step feeling heavier than the last. Upon entering the house, she noticed that everything was too neat, almost theatrical. A prepared table, chairs arranged, a staged atmosphere that made her even more uncomfortable. That's when she heard footsteps coming from another room. Her blood ran cold. Before she could ask anything, Jessica appeared. The woman who had been the mistress, who now occupied the place that was once hers, emerged with a satisfied smirk and her phone in her hand, already recording. "What is she doing here?" Madison's voice trembled. "Ryan, you said it would be just us." "Change of plans, Madison," Jessica replied coldly. "We thought it would be better to have witnesses, and since you love making public scenes so much, I figured it was only fair to share this moment with everyone." Madison realized too late what was happening. Jessica was live-streaming the whole thing on social media. This wasn't a conversation, it was an ambush. Ryan crossed his arms and his expression changed completely. The kindness vanished, replaced by a hard, calculated look. "Did you really think I wanted to make peace, Madison? After everything you've done? After spreading lies about me, trying to paint me as the villain?" "I never spread lies." Madison felt her legs weaken. "I only told the truth. You cheated on me. You destroyed our family." "Our family?" Jessica let out a sarcastic laugh, moving the phone closer to Madison's face. "You destroyed your own family with your drama, your accusations, your need to be the victim all the time. Ryan deserved better, and now everyone is going to see who you really are." Madison looked around, desperate, searching for an exit. But Ryan was blocking the main door and Jessica kept filming, narrating for the thousands of people watching, twisting every word, turning the victim into the aggressor. "Look at her, everyone," Jessica said to the camera with a mocking tone. "The poor little pregnant thing who loves to play the victim. But the truth is, she's always been manipulative, jealous, unstable. Ryan tried to save this marriage, but she wouldn't have it. And now she wants to destroy his life out of pure revenge." "That's not true." Madison felt the tears roll down her cheeks. "You're lying. You're twisting everything." Ryan stepped closer, his eyes icy. "You know what the problem is, Madison? You always believed you were special, that you deserved everything. But the truth is, you're ordinary and weak, and now everyone is going to see it." Madison tried to move, but a wave of dizziness hit her. Her blood pressure was rising, her body reacting to the extreme stress. She needed to get out of there, but she couldn't think straight. It all felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Jessica kept streaming, and the comments on the screen multiplied by the thousands. Some defended Madison, asking for someone to call for help. Others believed the narrative being constructed, accusing her of being hysterical, a liar, vindictive. Public opinion was split, while Madison felt her world collapse. Ryan began making increasingly serious accusations. He said she was an unfit mother, that she wasn't psychologically stable enough to raise this child, that he would fight in court for full custody. He threatened to use the entire live stream as evidence against her, to show a judge that Madison was unstable, dangerous, incapable. "You're not taking my son from me," Madison managed to say, her voice choked with emotion. "You don't have that right." "I have every right," Ryan answered with cruel confidence. "I have money, I have influence, I have excellent lawyers, and now I have proof that you're an unhinged person. Look at you. Look at how you're behaving. No judge will give you custody." Madison felt her legs give out. She fell to her knees, her hands instinctively protecting her belly. The emotional pain had become physical. Her whole body was shaking, her heart racing, her breath short. Jessica moved the phone even closer, capturing every second of the humiliation. But on the other side of the screen, somewhere in New York City, someone was watching in absolute shock. Helen had returned early from her hearing and, walking through the living room, saw her daughter's phone on the sofa, still open, with a live stream notification. When she tapped the screen and saw what was happening, her world stopped. She recognized the setting immediately. She had worked on a case years ago involving that same property. She knew exactly where it was. Without a second's hesitation, she grabbed her car keys, her phone, and ran out the door. As she sped down the highway, Helen was already calling the authorities. She explained the situation, asked for help, but knew she couldn't wait. She had to get to her daughter before it was too late. Every minute counted. At the house, Madison was at her breaking point. Her blood pressure had risen dangerously, and she felt sharp pains in her abdomen. The baby. She had to protect the baby, but she didn't have the strength to get up. Ryan and Jessica continued their performance, building a perfect narrative for the camera, turning everything into what they wanted it to be. That's when a familiar voice echoed from outside. A firm, authoritative voice filled with restrained fury. "Madison, where are you?" Helen had arrived, and with her, the whole truth was about to come to light. The spectacle Ryan and Jessica had created was about to backfire in a way they never could have imagined, and Madison, as fragile and broken as she was, still had a chance to be saved, because she had never really been alone. "Now, tell me what you think of this story, and how you think it will end." Helen's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. Ryan and Jessica glanced at each other, and for the first time since their trap had been set, fear flashed across their faces. Jessica instinctively turned the phone's camera on herself, trying to maintain her composure for the viewers, but her hands were trembling slightly. "Looks like we have another visitor," Jessica said, forcing a smile for the live stream. "The overprotective mother has arrived to defend her little girl." Helen pushed the door open with force and stepped inside. Her eyes immediately found Madison on the floor, pale, shaking, her hands on her belly. The fury she felt in that moment was so intense she had to take a deep breath to keep from losing control. But Helen wasn't a woman who acted on impulse. She was strategic, and she knew exactly what to do. "Madison, honey, are you okay?" Helen knelt beside her daughter, completely ignoring Ryan and Jessica. "Can you get up?" "Mom," Madison murmured, her voice weak. "I'm in pain. The baby." Helen immediately took out her own phone and called for an ambulance, giving the exact address. Her voice was firm, professional, but her eyes revealed the anguish of a mother watching her child suffer. As she spoke to the dispatcher, she looked up at Ryan and Jessica. "You two," she said with a terrifying calm, "don't even think about leaving. The police have been called, and everything you've done for the last 30 minutes has been recorded and will be used as evidence." Jessica let out a nervous laugh. "We haven't done anything illegal, Helen. We're just talking. And the live stream? Well, that's our right. Freedom of speech." Helen stood up slowly, with a dignity that commanded respect. "Talking? You lured a pregnant woman to an isolated location under false pretenses, subjected her to extreme psychological pressure, made false accusations broadcast publicly, threatened to take custody of her child, and now she's in a high-risk pregnancy situation. That has a name in the penal code. Several names, actually. Ryan's face hardened. You're exaggerating, as always. Madison came here because she wanted to. Nobody forced her. She came because you lied. Helen took a step toward him. You said you wanted to talk civilly. And what did you do? You staged a public spectacle of humiliation. But the game has changed now, Ryan, because I know exactly who you are and who your father is. I know about the connections you have, the money you use to cover up problems, and I guarantee you one thing, it's not going to work this time. Jessica, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, tried to end the live stream, but Helen was quicker. Don't you turn that off, she ordered. Let everyone see what happens when the truth shows up. You wanted an audience? Well, now you'll have to deal with the consequences. The live stream continued. The comments exploded on the screen. Thousands of people were now watching Helen confront the two of them, watching Madison on the floor in distress, watching the complete shift in dynamics. Those who had believed Ryan and Jessica's narrative began to question it. The calls for help increased. Emergency numbers were being shared. Public opinion was starting to turn. Madison felt another wave of pain and moaned softly. Helen immediately returned to her side, holding her hand tightly. Hang on, honey. The ambulance is on its way. You're going to be okay. Your baby is going to be okay. I shouldn't have come, Madison cried. You were right, I was so stupid. You weren't stupid. You were human. You wanted to believe in the best. But it's over now. I will never let them do this to you again. Outside, the siren of an ambulance began to wail, followed by the sirens of police cars. Ryan and Jessica realized the situation had escalated to a point of no return. Jessica finally ended the live stream, but it was too late. Hundreds of people had already recorded and shared clips. The internet doesn't forget. And the evidence was there, clear and undeniable. The paramedics rushed in and assessed Madison. Her blood pressure was dangerously high, and there were signs of fetal distress. They needed to get her to the hospital immediately. Helen got into the ambulance with her daughter, but before they left, she looked Ryan in the eyes with an intensity that made him take a step back. You wanted a war. Well, now you've got one. But it won't be against my daughter. It will be against me. And unlike her, I have nothing left to lose. The ambulance sped off as police officers began to question Ryan and Jessica. At first, they tried to maintain their composure, explaining that it was just a conversation that got out of hand, that Madison was unstable, that she had come there of her own free will. But the officers had already been briefed on the nature of the call, and when they saw the videos circulating on social media, the tone of the conversation changed completely. At the hospital, Madison was rushed into an examination room. The doctors worked quickly, monitoring the baby, controlling her blood pressure, trying to stabilize her. Helen remained in the waiting room, phone in hand, already organizing her strategy. She called the best lawyers she knew, explained the situation, and asked them to start gathering all the evidence. The live stream, the comments, the threats, everything would be documented. Hours passed. Night fell over New York City, but for Helen, time seemed to have stopped. Every minute the doctors took to give an update was an eternity. Finally, a doctor came out of the exam room and walked toward her. Ms. Helen, the doctor had a serious but not alarmed expression. Your daughter is stable now. We've managed to control her blood pressure, and the baby is doing fine, but she went through a severe emotional trauma. She's going to need complete bed rest and psychological counseling. Any new stress could put the pregnancy at risk again. Helen closed her eyes, letting out a deep sigh of relief. Can I see her? Yes, but just for a few minutes. She needs to rest. Madison was lying in the hospital bed, an IV in her arm and monitors attached to her belly. She looked small, fragile, completely different from the vibrant young woman she used to be. When she saw her mother walk in, her eyes filled with tears again. I'm so sorry, Mum. Helen came closer and held her daughter's hand gently. You have nothing to be sorry for. None of this was your fault. And now we're going to make things right, the right way. But what if they manage to take my baby from me? Madison trembled. Ryan said he has lawyers, money, influence. And I have 25 years of experience defending women in situations exactly like yours, Helen replied firmly. I know every loophole in the law. I know every judge, every prosecutor, every public defender in this city, and more importantly, now we have proof, public proof, that he himself created by live streaming it. Madison closed her eyes, exhausted. I just want this to be over. And it will be, but on our terms, the just way. Helen stayed for a few more minutes until Madison fell asleep, overcome by exhaustion and the medication she'd been given. When she left the room, she immediately switched back into battle mode. She called her legal team and scheduled a meeting for the next morning. They needed to act fast. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Ryan and Jessica were dealing with the consequences of their actions. The police had taken them in for questioning. They weren't arrested, but they knew it was only a matter of time. Social media had turned completely against them. The videos of the live stream were circulating with devastating captions. People who knew Ryan started to speak out, telling stories of his past abusive behavior. The reputation he was so proud of was being destroyed in real time. Jessica in particular was panicking. She hadn't anticipated things would go this far. She thought it would just be a way to humiliate Madison, to show the world that she was the new woman in Ryan's life, the winner of their dispute. But now her name was linked to something much more serious. She was being called an accomplice, cruel, inhumane. People found out where she worked and started sending messages to the company, demanding she be fired. Her own family called her, ashamed, demanding an explanation. Ryan tried to stay calm, but inside, he felt the fear growing too. His father, an influential businessman, had already called furious, saying he wouldn't use his connections to clean up this mess. For the first time in his life, Ryan was on his own, and that terrified him. The next morning, Helen gathered her legal team at her office. There were 5 specialized professionals, each bringing their own expertise. They began to build the case. They collected all the videos from the live stream, screenshots of the comments, text messages exchanged between Madison and Ryan over the past few months, and statements from people who had witnessed his behavior. It was an arsenal of evidence. We're going to file 3 simultaneous actions, Helen explained, pointing to the documents spread across the table. First, an immediate protective order, prohibiting any contact from Ryan with Madison until the baby is born. Second, a lawsuit for emotional distress and public defamation. Third, a criminal complaint for threats, coercion, and public harassment. One of the lawyers, Paul, a middle-aged man with decades of courtroom experience, nodded, impressed. Helen, you know his lawyer will try to argue it was just a heated conversation, that no crime was committed. Then we'll show the judge exactly what that conversation was, Helen replied, her eyes shining with determination. We'll request that every second of that live stream be analyzed. We'll bring in psychological experts to explain the impact of that kind of abuse, and we will ensure that Madison has all the protection she needs. The team worked for hours, preparing every detail. When they finally finished, it was late afternoon. Helen went back to the hospital to check on Madison. She found her daughter awake, sitting up in bed, looking out the window. How are you feeling? Helen asked, sitting in the chair beside the bed. Better. Physically, at least, Madison answered. But I can't stop thinking about everything that happened. The things he said. The way he looked at me. It was like I was nothing to him. Helen held her daughter's hand. You were never nothing to him, Madison. You were always everything, and that's why he tried to destroy you. Because men like him can't stand strong women. They can't stand it when they lose control. But I don't feel strong, Mom. I feel broken. Broken is different from destroyed, Helen said softly. Broken things can be put back together, and that's what we're going to do. Together. Madison looked at her mother, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe there really was a way forward. Maybe, with help, with time, with justice, she could recover from all of this. In the following days, the pieces on the board began to move. The lawsuits were filed. The protective order was granted immediately. Ryan was served notice that he could not come near Madison under penalty of arrest. Jessica also received legal notices. The media started covering the case. Reporters asked for interviews. TV shows wanted to tell the story. Helen shielded Madison from all the exposure. No interviews were given, no public statements were made. The strategy was clear. Let the evidence speak for itself. And it spoke volumes. Madison was discharged from the hospital, but under doctor's orders for complete bed rest. She spent her days confined to her room in Helen's house, trying to recover physically and emotionally. A therapist began visiting her 3 times a week. Slowly, Madison started to process the trauma, to understand that none of it had been her fault, that she had been a victim of manipulation and psychological abuse. But the legal battle was just beginning, and Ryan wasn't willing to accept defeat easily. His defense team began working on a counter-offensive. They claimed Madison was unstable, that she had provoked the whole situation, that she had gone to the house with manipulative intentions. They were trying to flip the script, to make her the villain of the story. Helen knew this would happen. She was prepared. And when the day of the first hearing arrived, she was ready to show that the truth always finds a way to win. Even when the road is long, even when it seems impossible. Justice, though slow, was starting to move. And Madison, though fragile and scared, was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a light at the end of this dark tunnel. The courtroom in New York City was packed that Friday morning. Madison felt her heart pound as she walked beside Helen through the bustling hallways. Her 7-month belly made each step more difficult, but she refused to show any weakness. Not here. Not now. Ryan would be there. And she needed to show that, despite everything, she was still standing. Upon entering the room, Madison saw Ryan sitting on the other side, next to his lawyers. He wore an impeccable suit, his hair slicked back, the perfect image of a respectable man. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. There was a challenge in his gaze, an arrogance that had not yet been broken. Jessica was not present. Her lawyer had advised her to stay away to avoid worsening the situation. The judge entered, a woman in her 50s with a serious expression and an attentive gaze. Judge Martha Reynolds was known for her impartiality and for not tolerating manipulation in her courtroom. Helen knew her reputation and was confident they would get a fair hearing. "We may begin," the judge announced, flipping through the documents before her. "I am reviewing the request for an emergency protective order and the allegations from both parties. I would like to hear first from the defense for Mr. Ryan Miller." Ryan's lawyer stood up, a tall man, with a deep voice and a confident posture. "Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman, a devoted father-to-be, and a citizen with no criminal record. What occurred on the day in question was a misunderstanding amplified by the emotions of a difficult pregnancy. My client was simply trying to speak with the mother of his child about practical matters related to parenthood." Helen jotted down every word, her expression unshakable. "Ms. Madison attended the location of her own free will," the lawyer continued. "There was no coercion, no threat. What occurred was a heated argument, as happens in any separation, especially when a child is involved. The live stream was initiated as a way to document the conversation, not to expose or humiliate." The judge cut him off. "Document for whom exactly? For thousands of people on social media." The lawyer hesitated for only a second. "We live in a digital age, Your Honor. People document their lives publicly. There is no crime in that." "We will continue to analyze that issue," the judge replied dryly. "I would now like to hear from the other party." Helen rose gracefully. "Your Honor, I bring here not just allegations, but concrete proof. I have the complete video of the live stream, where you can clearly see and hear the threats made by Mr. Ryan Miller against my daughter. Threats to take custody of the baby, to destroy her in court, to use his financial power to erase her. Furthermore, online witnesses, hundreds of them, reported witnessing psychological coercion and public humiliation." The judge nodded. "I will request the video be played." A television was brought into the room. The video began to play. Madison closed her eyes. She didn't want to relive that moment, but the sound of Ryan's and Jessica's voices echoed through the room, every word dripping with cruelty. When the video reached the part where Ryan said he had the power to take her son, the judge signaled for it to be paused. "Mr. Miller," the judge turned to him, "do you confirm you said those words?" His lawyer tried to intervene, but Ryan stopped him. "Yes, I did, but I was angry, out of control. It wasn't a real threat." "Not a real threat?" The judge raised an eyebrow. "You stated, verbatim, that you would use your money and influence to secure full custody of the child and leave the mother with nothing. How is that not a threat?" Ryan swallowed hard. "It was an unfortunate choice of words, Your Honor. I regret it." The video continued. Every minute that passed made Ryan's position more untenable. The cameras had captured everything. The aggressive tone of voice, the intimidating posture, Jessica filming Madison in a vulnerable state while making derogatory comments. When the video finally ended, a heavy silence filled the room. The judge took a deep breath. "I am granting the protective order. Mr. Ryan Miller is prohibited from coming within 200 yards of Ms. Madison, from making any direct or indirect contact, and from publishing any content about her on social media. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Furthermore, I am ordering an investigation be opened into possible crimes of making threats and unlawful imprisonment." Ryan's lawyer tried to protest, but the judge had already brought down her gavel. The decision was made. As she left the courtroom, Madison felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. She had won this battle, but the war was far from over. "You did very well," Helen said, hugging her daughter. "Now let's go home. You need to rest." But when they reached the parking garage, they found something unexpected. A well-dressed, middle-aged man was waiting by Helen's car. When he saw them approaching, he took a step forward. "Miss Helen, my name is Frank Miller. I'm Ryan's father." Helen immediately positioned herself in front of Madison protectively. "Mr. Miller, your son is prohibited from having any contact with us. I imagine that extends to you as well." I know. He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I came to apologize." Madison and Helen exchanged surprised glances. Frank continued. "I watched the video. I saw everything my son did. And I am ashamed. Ashamed as a father, as a man. I raised a monster and didn't realize it. I turned a blind eye to behaviors I should have corrected years ago." "Why are you telling me this?" Madison asked, her voice trembling. "Because you deserve to know that not all of the Miller family supports what happened, and because, as a grandfather, I want to ensure my grandson is raised far from this toxicity. I am willing to testify on your behalf if necessary. I am willing to tell you things about Ryan that could help you in this process." Helen studied the man cautiously. "And why would you do that? He's your son." "Because being a father doesn't mean protecting mistakes. It means correcting them. And I've protected Ryan from consequences for too long. It's time for him to face the truth." Helen took a business card from her pocket and handed it to Frank. "Contact my office. We'll talk formally." Frank took the card, thanked them, and walked away. Madison watched him go, still processing the unexpected turn of events. Was it genuine? Or was it another strategy from the Miller family to manipulate the situation? In the following days, Frank kept his word. He contacted Helen's office and gave a detailed statement. He revealed that Ryan had always had controlling behavior in previous relationships, that there were other ex-girlfriends who could testify about psychological abuse, that the family had paid to cover up embarrassing situations in the past. Each revelation was a bomb that blew apart the carefully constructed defense of Ryan's lawyers. Madison followed everything with a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because the truth was finally coming out. Sadness because she had to see proof that the man she once loved was even worse than she had imagined. Her therapist, Dr. Bennett, a kind woman with curly hair and a warm smile, worked intensely with Madison to help her process the emotional roller coaster. "Madison," Dr. Bennett said gently in one of their sessions, "you need to understand that none of this was your fault. Ryan is a man with serious control and empathy issues. You were a victim, and now you are a survivor." "I know that in my head," Madison replied, her hand on her belly. "But my heart still hurts. I still wonder what I could have done differently." Nothing, Dr. Bennett answered firmly. You couldn't have done anything differently because the problem was never you. It was him. It always was. While Madison worked on her emotional recovery, the case gained more and more media attention. Newspapers published articles about psychological violence in relationships. TV shows debated the topic. Ryan and Jessica's live stream had become a symbol of how technology could be used as a weapon to destroy people. Jessica, in particular, suffered severe consequences. She was fired from her job. She lost friends. Her family distanced themselves. And now she was facing a lawsuit from Madison for complicity and emotional distress. She desperately tried to apologize publicly, claiming she had been influenced by Ryan, saying she regretted it. But the internet doesn't forgive easily, and her apologies sounded too empty, too late. Ryan, on the other hand, remained publicly silent, but behind the scenes, his situation was worsening. The company where he worked asked him to take a leave of absence until the case was resolved. Friends avoided him. His once impeccable reputation was now irrevocably stained, and worst of all, his own father had turned against him. The relationship between Ryan and Frank completely collapsed. They had one last conversation in a coffee shop in downtown Manhattan, where Frank made it clear he would no longer support his son financially or emotionally until he took responsibility for his actions. "You disappoint me, son," Frank said, his eyes welling up. "I gave you everything, education, opportunities, values, and you chose this path. You chose to be cruel. I can't be an accomplice to this anymore." Ryan, for the first time, felt the true weight of his actions. Without his father's support, without his job, without his reputation, he was truly alone. And the fear he had always tried to instill in others now consumed him. Meanwhile, Madison entered her 8th month of pregnancy. Preparations for the baby's arrival began. Helen transformed one of the rooms in the house into a beautiful nursery for her grandson, painted in soft shades of yellow and white. Madison spent hours there, arranging tiny clothes, organizing diapers, imagining what it would be like to hold her child in her arms. One Tuesday afternoon, while folding tiny onesies, Madison sensed a presence at the door. She turned and saw Helen watching her with an emotional smile. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," Helen said. "I hope so," Madison replied. "I'm so afraid I won't be good enough." "Fear is normal. All mothers have it. But you have something many don't. Courage. You faced the worst and survived. You can handle anything motherhood throws at you." Madison felt her eyes tear up. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom." Helen entered the room and hugged her daughter tenderly. "We're a team. Always have been. Always will be." That hug carried years of love, protection, and partnership. Madison realized in that moment that, even though she had lost so much, she still had what was most important: the unwavering presence of someone who truly loved her. The following week, there was another hearing. This time, it was to address issues related to paternity and custody. Ryan tried to argue that he wanted to be present in his son's life, that he had rights as a father, but his lawyer had little to work with after everything that had been revealed. The judge heard both sides and made an interim decision. She ruled that after the birth, a psychological evaluation of Ryan would be conducted to determine if he was emotionally fit to be a healthy parent. Until then, any contact with Madison would remain prohibited. Temporary custody of the child would be with the mother, under judicial supervision. It was a partial victory. Madison knew the custody battle would likely last for years, but at least for now her son would be protected. Leaving the courthouse, Madison felt a sharp cramp. Helen immediately steadied her. "Are you okay?" "I think so." Madison took a deep breath. "Just a twinge." But throughout the day, the cramps intensified. By evening, Madison realized they weren't just cramps. They were contractions. The baby was coming. 3 weeks early, but he was coming. Helen called the maternity ward, grabbed the pre-packed hospital bag, and rushed Madison to the hospital. On the way, Madison held her mother's hand tightly, a mix of fear and excitement swirling inside her. Her son was about to be born, and with him, a new life was about to begin. A life where Madison would no longer be just the victim of a painful story, but the hero of her own new beginning. The maternity ward was quiet in the early hours of the morning. Madison breathed deeply, trying to manage the pain of the contractions, which were coming faster and stronger. Helen held her hand, wiped the sweat from her forehead with a cool cloth, and whispered words of encouragement. "You're doing so well, honey. Just a little longer. Your baby is almost here." Madison tried to focus on her mother's voice, using it as an anchor to get through the waves of pain that seemed endless. 7 hours of labor. Her body was exhausted, but her heart was filled with a determination she didn't know she had. This baby represented everything. He was proof that even after so much suffering, there was still life, still hope, still love. The doctor came into the room, checked her dilation, and smiled. "It's time. Let's go to the delivery room." Madison felt a rush of fear and excitement all at once. Helen squeezed her hand. "I'll be with you. I'm not leaving your side." In the delivery room, under the bright lights, surrounded by the medical team and with her mother by her side, Madison summoned all the strength left in her tired body. Every push was a battle, every breath was a victory, and when she finally, after what felt like an eternity, heard the baby's first cry, Madison broke down in tears. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, placing the baby on Madison's chest. "A beautiful baby boy." Madison looked at his tiny red face, his closed eyes, his minuscule clenched fists, and felt a love so profound, so overwhelming, she thought her heart would burst. "Hi, my love," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm your mommy, and I will always protect you. Always." Helen stood beside them, her eyes glistening, watching her daughter hold her grandson for the first time. The moment was heavy, with so much accumulated emotion, so much history. It was the end of a cycle of pain and the beginning of a new cycle of love. The baby was taken for his initial checkup, but within minutes, he was back in Madison's arms. She watched him for hours, memorizing every detail of his face. She decided to name him Michael, a strong, beautiful name, full of meaning. Michael would be her strength, her reason to keep going, her motivation to never give up again. As dawn broke, news of the birth began to spread. Madison's friends sent congratulatory messages. Her therapist, Dr. Bennett, sent flowers. Helen's lawyers sent an emotional card. And to Madison's surprise, Frank Miller also sent a gift for his grandson. A teddy bear accompanied by a card that simply read, "Welcome to the world, Michael. Your grandfather loves you and will always protect you." Ryan, of course, made no contact. He was forbidden by the protective order. But Madison knew he had been informed of the birth. And strangely, she didn't feel sad that he wasn't there. She only felt indifference. That man didn't deserve to be part of this sacred moment. 3 days later, Madison was discharged and went home with Michael. Helen had arranged everything perfectly. The nursery was ready, the house was filled with flowers, and there was a menu of prepared meals, so Madison wouldn't have to worry about anything but taking care of the baby and recovering. The first few days were intense, sleepless nights, endless crying, constant doubts. But they were also full of discoveries. Madison discovered an inner strength she never knew she had. She discovered she was capable of unconditional love. She discovered that despite everything she had been through, she could still smile. She could still have hope. Helen helped her with everything, embracing her role as a grandmother with absolute dedication. She split the nights with Madison, rocked Michael when he cried, and taught her daughter all the secrets of motherhood she had learned decades ago. The bond between mother and daughter, already strong, became unbreakable. While Madison devoted herself to the baby, the legal process continued. Ryan's psychological evaluation was completed, and the results were not in his favor. The psychologist's report identified narcissistic personality traits, difficulty taking responsibility, a lack of empathy, and manipulative tendencies. It recommended that if he were to have contact with the child, it should be supervised and only after a long period of therapy. Judge Martha Reynolds called one final hearing before delivering her final verdict. Ryan attended, looking visibly defeated. The past few months had taken their toll. He had lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, and the arrogance that had always defined him was replaced by a look of defeat. "Mr. Miller," the judge began, "after reviewing all the evidence, testimonies, and psychological reports, I have made my decision. Full custody of Michael will be granted exclusively to the mother, Ms. Madison. You will have the right to supervised visits once a month, provided you can prove you are in psychological and psychiatric treatment. Furthermore, child support is set at 30% of your monthly income, and I am upholding the current protective order. You may not approach the child's mother or make any direct contact. All communication regarding the child must be conducted through your lawyers." Ryan's lawyer tried to argue, but the judge was firm. "The decision is final. This hearing is adjourned." Madison left the courthouse with a huge weight lifted from her shoulders. She had won. Not just in a legal sense, but in the deepest sense. She had survived. She had rebuilt herself. And now she had the protection of the law to raise her son in peace. Jessica also received the verdict in her case. She was ordered to pay a substantial sum for emotional damages and was forbidden from mentioning Madison or Michael publicly. She tried to appeal but was unsuccessful. She would have to live with the consequences of her choices for the rest of her life. The following months were a time of adjustment and healing. Madison went back to work remotely, balancing motherhood with her career. Michael grew up healthy, a calm and smiling baby who lit up the house with his presence. Helen became the most devoted grandmother in the world, always there, always available. Frank Miller kept his promise to be a present grandfather. He visited Michael regularly, always bringing gifts, always respecting the boundaries Madison set. He developed a genuine relationship with his grandson, and Madison grew to trust him. It was comforting to know that Michael would have at least one positive paternal figure from the Miller family. Ryan initially tried to attend the supervised visits, but soon gave up. He claimed it was humiliating to be watched while spending time with his own son. In reality, he couldn't stand the mirror those visits held up, the reflection of an absent father, a man who had destroyed his own family. He chose to withdraw completely, paying child support but forgoing contact. Strangely, Madison felt no sadness about this, only a quiet relief. Michael would be better off without the toxic presence of a father who didn't know how to love in a healthy way. And she would ensure her son grew up surrounded by true love, the love of his mother, his grandmother, and the paternal grandfather who chose to be present in the right way. A year after Michael's birth, Madison agreed to give her first interview. It was for a television show that focused on psychological abuse in relationships. She wanted to use her story to help other women going through the same thing. Sitting in the studio, under the bright lights, Madison told her story with a serenity that surprised even herself. She talked about the signs she had ignored at the beginning of the relationship, the gradual manipulation, the day of the ambush, the recovery process. But, most importantly, she talked about overcoming it all. "What I want other women to know," Madison said, looking directly into the camera, "is that we are not alone. There are people willing to help. The shame should not be ours, but belong to the person who hurts us. And it is possible to rebuild. It is possible to be happy again. It is possible to turn pain into strength." The interview had a huge impact. Thousands of women reached out, thanking her for having the courage to speak. Many shared their own stories. A movement of awareness began to grow. And Madison realized that her pain, as terrible as it had been, could serve a greater purpose. Helen watched the interview from the living room, with Michael on her lap. When it was over, she wiped tears from her eyes and looked at her grandson. "Your mother is a warrior, Michael, a true warrior." Madison continued her journey. She went back to therapy, no longer as a patient in crisis, but as someone in a continuous process of growth. She started writing a book about her story, intending to publish it and use the proceeds to help other victims of psychological abuse. She created an online support group where women could share experiences and find support. Her life, which had been completely destroyed a year and a half ago, now had a new meaning. A meaning built on the ruins of what was, but also on the hope of what could be. One Sunday afternoon, Madison was at the park with Michael. The little boy, now 15 months old, was taking his first wobbly steps on the grass, laughing every time he stumbled and fell. Madison watched him with a smile on her face, her heart overflowing with love. Helen sat down on the bench next to her daughter. "You're different," her mother said. "Lighter, happier." "I am," Madison agreed. "It took time, but I think I've finally managed to leave the past behind. I haven't forgotten. I'll never forget. But I no longer let it define me. Now I'm defined by what I've built since, by who I am capable of being." Helen held her daughter's hand. "I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you, Mum. You were my salvation, my strength when I had none." "We've always been a team," Helen smiled. "And now there are 3 of us." Michael ran toward them, his little arms outstretched, shouting, "Mama!" with all the excitement of a child discovering the world. Madison scooped him up, covered his face with kisses, and felt a deep peace wash over her heart. That moment, so simple, so ordinary, was actually extraordinary. It was proof that love wins, that justice, even when slow, arrives, that it's possible to survive the worst and find happiness on the other side, that no woman has to go through this alone. Madison's story was not unique. Unfortunately, thousands of women lived through similar situations every day. But it was also a story of hope, a story that showed that with support, with courage, with determination, it is possible to climb out of the abyss and live again. As the sun set over New York City, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Madison hugged Michael and Helen, forming a circle of love and protection. There, in that park, in that perfect moment, she understood that she had finally reached the other side, not as the same person she was before, but as a stronger, wiser, more complete version of herself. The storm had passed, and now, under the clear sky, Madison could finally breathe. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Madison and Michael has touched your heart. If you were moved, if you related, or if you know someone who needs to hear a message like this, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what part of this journey resonated with you the most. Every day, we bring you intense stories like this one, stories that reveal the deepest side of the human soul, that show the power of overcoming adversity, and that prove we are never truly alone when we have love and courage. Remember, if you or someone you know is in an abusive situation, please seek help. There are people and organizations ready to support you. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be free. We'll see you in the next episode with another story that will stir your emotions and make you believe in the power of a new beginning.